thousands of children participating in how to raise the value of fair trade. Fair trade movement is growing significantly. Asia has a long way to go. It has to catch up and it has to move fast. I hope that my talk will help you to see how similar the SEPS approach is aligned to how fair trade and how we can look forward, how we can bring that synergy together and actually move them forward as part of the solution to resolving global poverty. And let's talk about environmental poverty, cultural poverty, social poverty, along with the poverty of economic poverty. I'm hoping that by looking at how to recognise a fair trade organisation, it will help to take us one step closer to wanting to grow that movement, or encourage others to join the movement, or build in activities which will support and build those movements. As Dr. Lisa Dakanai said yesterday, we need to build CSR, we need to build it so that it recognises its contribution to poverty reduction.
I'm sorry. Let me just do it.
No, I can do it. I prefer to do it.
Here, just click this, the button. You need to wait.
Okay. So I've worked in fair trade since 1986. That's me at the bottom in a village in India. I went back there last year, and this was produced out of one of the homes there for me to remind me of my roots. I still work in supply chain management, looking at getting the product from the idea to a sellable product. I'm also a campaigner, looking to change the world that we live in, so it's not just through commerce, but also in terms of international rules. I'm not going to talk about fair trade in general. I hope that as a concept it's familiar to you all. I want to talk specifically about fair trade organisations. Organisations that have fair trade at the heart of their organisation and how to recognise them. And hopefully, by doing so, how we can build the impact and growth of fair trade as a whole. We have a common definition. This is the fine definition. It's recognised and used all over the world. But I would like to look at the second paragraph there, how fair trade organisations are a significant part of that definition of fair trade. It's a movement, it's already established and recognised. In Europe, the 2006 report on fair trade approved by the European Parliament has had ripple effect throughout the world. Every free trade agreement now that is put in place should have fair trade included into that free trade agreement. It's got into legislation in a few countries around the world, and it is really taking root in terms of how it's defined and taken forward. So, what is a fair trade organisation? It's dedicated in its entirety to fair trade. It's not something. It's not add-on. It's not a CSR activity that is some extra activity to increase the profile of the organisation. The organisation has to have fair trade at the core of everything it does. It's not a charity that does it as an add-on. Its core activities is from trade. It follows the 10 principles of fair trade, and I've got some cards here if anyone wants a card with the principles of fair trade on them. You can pick them up. And it's not one type of organisation. We have a lot of cooperatives, we have a lot of community-based organisations or community organisations, to return to our last speaker, but there's no one model because it's open to every interpretation in every country around the world. But these things have to be embedded into the core of the organisation. And I think very importantly, it's also about taking It recognises the formal production, the formal registered employed contractors, but it's also about moving people from informal to formal employment. It's about recognising informal producers in supply chains. So a lot of CSR today is all about making the factory look absolutely beautiful and clean and lovely, but it's not going beyond that. It's not going beyond that to every 2 people who work in informal employment for every 1 person who works in formal supply chains. So fair trade is about being inclusive, going out, integration, equality, social justice through trade. It's also about bringing products to the market that people want and like. It's not about charity purchasing, it's about good quality products, about unique products. It's about taking those products and making sure that they're sellable, commercial, delivering triple bottom line value. I can give you lots and lots of examples of this happening. Now, very interestingly, many of the organisations that I work with in terms of value-added or craft-based products very often don't go out and publicise what they're doing because they are working in conventional supply chains, they have successful business models, and they're not going to publicise how they're making money, so you don't know about it. These are guys who are supplying into commercial supply chains in significant amounts. You go to the body shop, there's products there which are hemp mitts from made in a community in the south of Bangladesh. You go to IKEA and there's products made in soapstone from Kenya. You go to Southern Luzon here, and there is 2 containers a month going out to California of parrot toys. Now these are products which are selling in significant amounts, making large amounts of money for value-added producers, but nobody knows about them because they are selling into commercial supply chains, and these are people who are not networking with NGOs, they're not networking with funding organisations. These organisations believe in their hearts that the way to end poverty is by working in trade and selling products with a pro-poverty agenda. So, and today you can recognise them by being members of WTO, and we've got this guarantee system in place, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. So every organisation has to follow the 10 principles of fair trade. 10 principles of fair trade have been developed over 20 years. They're a participative process by fair trade organisations, for fair trade organisations. And anyone wants a card here, they're on here, please take one. And I think this thing that really came home to me yesterday is the similarity between this and the SEPS approach. The organisation has to have poverty reduction, benefiting marginalised communities at the heart and core of what it's doing. Each one of these principles, we call them the principles, is evolving. But to make any change to one of these principles, it has to be proposed to the democratic body, it has to be approved by consensus by everybody, and this is a slowly evolving process by a very, very participative democratic process, bottom up. This is not some corporate body, it's not some external body, it's the actual, comes from the grassroots itself in terms of defining and working with marginalised communities. So just quickly, and I can give you a whole 2-day workshop on this. So and if anyone wants that 2-day workshop, please do. And I'd like to point out we have in the room here 2 fair trade organisations represented. So Rad from SAFI, if you'd like to stand up, and Zarina from CCAP, if you'd like to stand up. So if you really want to just double check that I'm not talking rubbish, and that really that there is really the grassroots activities, please talk to our representatives here, who will really give you some how it actually operates in the field on the ground. So in 2007, we agreed that we needed to, the whole movement was based on trust. It was based on trust and personal relationships. We're talking 20 years ago. And as it's moved forward and grown, it's realised it has to be more robust in checking and ensuring that fair trade is really what it says it is. So since 2007, we've been working on a system. We now have a system, it's up and running. And by end of 2015, it will be really visible. But you won't see it really until we want to make sure that everybody's gone through the system until we take it visible to the, especially business to business, and in terms of recognising their corporate social responsibility. So you have to have fair trade absolutely in the core of the organisation. It has to be in your Articles of Association, a registration document, or incorporated in some legal process. It can't be somebody who's the CEO of the organisation who decides to write a mission statement and write it on this computer and keep it there. It has to be embedded into the core of the organisation. The organisation has to have 2 years of accounts. It can't be new. And they must demonstrate that the income of the organisation is through business. And very interestingly, talking to Vi's talk earlier, we're now getting applications from people who are doing things like coffee roasting, people who are employing disadvantaged communities actually in service provision. So there's no one model about where that the labour is included in it, but it has to be a high labour-intensive, disadvantaged community who are coming forward, benefiting from the trade. So this then goes through comes to us in the regional office. We check all the documents, make everything sure. It's then approved at the global level. We then have a self-assessment report. This is an entirely incredibly intensive report on the organisation. And finally, it goes to external audit. Why has it go through all this process before it goes to external audit? Because we want to keep our costs low. The last thing we want to do is have a system for benefiting marginalised communities which is not accessible due to cost. So we are really, really fighting to keep the costs as low as possible. We are a very, very lean and mean organisation. We recently increased our fee in WFTO Asia by €25. And we had an enormous debate, and the whole thing went to democratic vote, and it was approved. But we're not out there getting in the mega bucks. We are very lean and mean because we know the organisations we work with cannot deal with large amounts of money. We need to be appropriate to the organisations who are our members and answerable to them. So then once you have the audit in place, then there is a cycle of peer review and audit, and that is reduced depending on the risk of the organisation. So this system is now up and running. We have organisations guaranteed all over the world. We have the label is being used on product, and that business-to-business recognition is now starting to happen. So, labelling of goods with fair trade, the Fair Trade International label has brought enormous growth, and it's hoped that growth will come with this Fair Trade Organisation label. We believe that with the growth that's gone through the supermarkets with the Fair Trade label, we've brought enormous breadth to the movement of fair trade. So fair trade has reached to millions of consumers in a way that it was never possible without that labelling and going to supermarkets. But who pays the piper calls the tunes. So as fair trade has grown to selling increasingly to supermarkets without the voice of dedicated fair trade organisations, the depth of the discussion is being lost. And we believe we need both. We need the depth of the dedicated fair trade organisations who are able to campaign and push. And particularly going back to that part of the definition, pushing for changes in the rules and practices of conventional international trade. So that's something that's very difficult to do if you're a farmer supplying to a supermarket. But it's easy to do if you have a dedicated supply chain and you can stand there and say, well, actually, we believe the fair trade price for coffee should be increased by 10%. And when Fair Trade International turns around and said, well, actually the pressure from the supermarkets is they cannot absorb another 10%. So the fair trade organisations go out and say, well, we'll pay the 10% anyway. And then the pressure is then put back to the supermarkets, and they say, well, they can pay it, why can't you? And it happens. So with the pressure, the pressure is needed from the two sides of the discussion. So, so for example, in 2000, so what benefits that we get from being a fair trade organisation? So you get recognition, being able to be seen yourself, credibility, market access through coordinating and connecting with other organisations around the world who want to buy fair trade products, and potential for advocacy. So we campaigned on Fashion Revolution Day. This, what I'm modelling here is fair trade cotton manufactured in India. All the dyes and inks on it are environmentally friendly. This cotton can't just be traced to being fair trade, it can be traced to the farmer. This is not an easy job. It is not easy to do fair trade. It's extremely, extremely challenging. So we will be, so Fashion Revolution Day on the 24th of April is a day to look at changing that and looking at the way we purchase our clothes, what we do with them from cradle to cradle, how we dispose of them, what the impact they have. World Fair Trade Day is in second Saturday of May, and we'd like to invite everybody to participate in that, in looking, and this year we're going to be asking people to be the change, and we're looking at the power of supermarkets and their power, international power in purchasing around the world. And we have a Fair Trade Advocacy Office based in Brussels. So we campaigned and lobbied very, very strongly on the Fair Trade Beyond campaign to include, make sure that the poverty reduction agenda included fair trade in the post-millennium goals. So we are very active in lobbying and campaigning. And just to give you a little bit on that, some dynamics of the power of the supermarket and why we're doing something about it. I think the figure there that jumps out for me is the 90% of the Portuguese combined food market share is controlled by 3 supermarkets. This is not, these are very much European, USA figures, but I'm based in Chiang Mai, Thailand. There, the biggest supermarket is Tesco's, British-owned supermarket. Let's get real about this. This is happening, this is a dimension that's happening, and how are we going to look at it, how are we going to address it without us getting together, joining the movement and campaigning and changing this. And that's the 2 prongs of fair trade. One is the business model, the other one is advocacy, getting out there and changing the way things happen. Okay, yes, it's finally on my last, it's all right. So very, very quickly, I've got a slide here, so hopefully you can have a quick read about who we are and what we're doing. We're all over the world. We've got the regional office here is in Chiang Mai. Please come and ask me questions about what we're doing, how we're doing it, how to join us, how to go forward. I'm really excited to be here. I think it's a great conference. I'd like to thank the organisers for organising it, because there's such enormous synergy between all the different people here. I want to go out and make sure that the Down Foundation is connecting to our members to make sure that the financial services are operating properly. I want to get the coffee roasters all over the whole of Asia. I just think there's so much potential for synergy here that I think it's a great honour to be here. So thank you. Just be the change, and please come and ask me questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. I think we have time for a couple of questions.